Hello Retro fans, it's RetroMartin here. Today I want to talk about strategy RPGs or tactical RPGs for Sega's Megadrive or the Genesis if you're in North America. The genre itself was in its infancy in the 1990s when the Megadrive was at the height of its popularity. It wasn't until Nintendo released Fire Emblem for the Famicom in 1990 that a lot of the elements that are common to strategy RPGs that we would use as the basis for them were put in place. Up until that point, games were either just turn-based strategy or they had a very small amount of strategy RPG elements to them, whether it's just in one part of the system but the rest of it was something else entirely. So obviously when Fire Emblem came out, the Mega Drive was already out, which was a successor system. So it was that Fire Emblem itself on the Famicom was an 8-bit system game, whereas the Mega Drive was 16-bit. The SNES was either out or pretty much on its way out in Japan itself. So let's strap in and we'll see exactly what games we have to look at. So the first game I want to talk about is Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday. Now this originally was released in 1990 for MS-DOS, Commodore 64 and Amiga systems by Strategic Systems Inc. It was later on released in 1991 for the Sega Genesis, so unfortunately that means it only came out in North America, so PAL Gamers in Japan didn't get an official release of it at all. As it stands, the game itself is a bit more Dungeons and Dragons in style. You pick your character's race and some set classes and then pick skills as you would do if you were playing another Dungeons and Dragons game. The game then plays out with story scenes and is seen from an isometric view where you will wander around and do any actions and random events will happen such as battles. The sound and music are nothing special. It doesn't really feel like a game that makes any use of the Mega Drive hardware at all. But everything is done via dice roll more than anything else. So the only reason I've actually included this is that the battle scenes themselves do feel a bit more reminiscent of a strategy RPG. Your chosen avatar and anyone that's helping you out will be on screen along with the enemies. You'll move your avatar around and then shoot at enemies and then the battle will play out, and even if your avatar actually dies, the battle will continue until it finishes, and then it will give you a game over, which seems like a bit of a bizarre decision to me. Other than that, I'd say it's not really a strategy RPG, but the battles were reminiscent of it that I wanted to at least include it. Unfortunately, the Genesis version is very cut down. It has half the races and classes on offer, so it's not as good as its computer brethren. It's not a game I'd massively recommend unless you're into that sort of thing. Certainly doesn't feel like a full-blown strategy RPG, but because it is one of the earlier games on the system, I wanted to include it because it is at least reminiscent of a strategy RPG. Okay, game number 2 is Master of Monsters. This was another early effort that was originally released on a variety of platforms in 1988 by Telenet Japan. Made its way onto the Mega Drive a little bit later. Fans of the Civilization series of games will feel right at home with the way it looks. It's all in a hexagonal pattern with you being able to move your chosen monster around. Other than that, it's nothing else to do with that particular series. 4 teams can duke it out, taking watchtowers and other areas and besting your opponents. Again, it's barely a strategy RPG, but I wanted to mention it just because it does at least add in, prior to Fire Emblem, the element of being able to level up. So when your monsters battle it out, as you can probably see with the screenshots, at the end of the battle you'll earn XP and they will level up and get stronger. So that to me at least gets it in more in the realm of a strategy RPG. Probably more so than Buck Rogers because the actual game itself is also a strategy game, so it's a little bit more in the realms of it. Okay, the next game I want to talk about is Langrissa, The Descendants of Light, which came out in 1991. Excellent little title from Messiah Games. By this point, there were at least a few other strategy RPGs, so the main template for the genre was made by this point, with named characters fighting it out one-on-one across a big battle board. What sets Langrissa apart was the fact that you had nameless soldiers that could also fight. So either you'd have a named character fighting one on against the other, or you'd have these soldiers coming in with 5 to 10 of them on a battle. So when the battle screen would segue in, you'd have a larger scale fight happening, and it just made it feel that much larger. Instead of just having a small core cast who were able to just decimate hundreds of enemies, it now felt like it was at least a war. Now, Langrissa actually did make it stateside under the name of Warsong. PAL gamers would have to wait until 2022 with the release of the Megadrive Mini 2 to be able to play it. So, bit of a shame, but that was quite normal for PAL back then. The game itself has quite a variety of victory conditions. It's not just the standard beat every enemy on the map. Sometimes you have to escape. Sometimes you've got to escort a non-player character around. Gave it that good variety, which, considering how early the genre was in its lifetime, it varied things up quite nicely quite early on. It's got some great character designs that are reminiscent of anime. It's got a really nice animated intro. As a little bit of a fact, some Sega fans would also quite like the composer of the game, Noriyuki Iwadare. He's the one that composed the Luna and Grandia games. So, as you'd expect, Langrissa itself has an exceptional soundtrack. As you've been able to see from the screenshots, it's a beautiful looking game. I can't recommend it enough. And quite luckily, there was a sequel on the Mega Drive as well, which we will talk about in a little while. Okay, next up is a game that everyone's expecting. It's one of the best strategy RPGs ever created and is absolutely one of the best games on the Mega Drive itself. It is, of course, Shining Force, which came out in 1992. Sega obviously thought there was a market for strategy RPGs in the West. They probably identified the fact that Nintendo weren't bringing Fire Emblem over, and just like they did with the Master System, identified that there was actually a gap. Especially in Europe, which is why the Master System sold exceptionally well over here. They released Shining Force, and that is, of course, the reason why it did so well, apart from the fact it's actually a brilliant game. So this was created by Climax Entertainment and Sonic Software Planning. Climax Entertainment went on to do games like Landstalker, Lady Stalker, and Dark Savior. And Sonic Software Planning are better known by their name of Camelot that they changed to when Shining Force 3 came out. They are, of course, the creators of the Golden Sun series on the Game Boy Advance and DS, and probably quite well known for their Mario Sports series that they release at the moment for Nintendo. The game itself is very similar to Fire Emblem. It's a full-blown RPG with quite a big story, lots of text to set the scene and the lore. Unlike Fire Emblem, this one actually has exploration. You're able to go through towns, talk to non-player characters, explore to look for treasure chests. There are loads of hidden characters, including one you'd miss right at the start if you actually exit the very first level. Otherwise, you have to wait one to get him. But it's, little hidden things like that that really set the game apart. The battles themselves are really, really large. Some of them take place on big maps. And can take quite a while to get through. However, unlike Fire Emblem, there's no permadeath, meaning your characters may die, but they will come back on the next fight as long as you pay to revive them. It makes it a lot more casual friendly because you can then level up the characters as and when you want to. And it just made the game much more user friendly, which is another reason why it cemented it as a classic. The music was created by Masahiko Yoshimura. It was really, really well done. Never outstays its welcome. Some of the instruments used can sound a little bit whiny over long periods, but considering the time that it came out, It was really, really well done. It's a great little soundtrack and worth listening to. And the game itself has been re-released many, many times on Mega Drive and Genesis collections, the Nintendo Switch Online via the Mega Drive expansion, and also the Mega Drive Mini as well. So it's a really easy game to be able to locate and play. It's absolutely worth your time and is quite possibly one of the best strategy RPGs ever released. Okay, the next game on our list is the sequel to Shining Force 2, which came out originally in 1993. Sega obviously thought that the first game was good enough to be able to come up with a sequel. Like its predecessor, it's a full-blown RPG with places to explore, backtracking, chests, exploration, non-player characters to talk to, lots of hidden characters to go out and find, and really big, epic strategy RPG battles across really large maps. The game itself is much more colourful than its predecessor. It runs faster. It basically just ramps up in every way, shape or form, so it's even more accessible than the previous game. There's still no permanent death, so you can still level up your characters as you feel you need to. The game itself has been re-released loads of times, just like Shining Force, Mega Drive and Genesis collections. It's on Nintendo Switch Online. It's on the Mega Drive Mini 2 as well, along with Shining Force CD, which isn't a game I'm going to go to in this particular video, but it absolutely is worth your time to get a Mega Drive Mini 2 to pick up these two games. Taking over on composing duties is Motoaki Takenouchi, who does an absolutely fantastic job of improving on the first game's already great music. It removes some of the whinier sounding instruments, so it's a little bit softer on the ears. Like the first game, it doesn't outstay its welcome on any of the stages, and sometimes the repetitive nature of the tunes, even though they are longer than you'd expect, doesn't get annoying in any way, shape or form. The game itself is just absolutely fantastic. The battle scenes are brilliant. Everything just connects really, really well with it. It's absolutely worth your time and is quite possibly one of the best strategy RPGs of all time, and probably the best strategy RPG on the Mega Drive. I would recommend you get access to it in any way you can and play it. It is really, really good. So finally on our little tour we have Langrisser 2, which came out in 1994, so after Shining Force 2 had already come out, again by Messiah Games. It's a follow-up to the original Langrisser. Unfortunately it only came out on the Mega Drive in Japan. It's never had an official release in its Mega Drive form outside of there, so America, PAL Gamers, never had an official release. There is, however, a remake of Langrisser 1 and 2 put together, which came out in 2019 for the PlayStation 4 and Switch. There's a demo on the online stores for both of those, so it's worth checking out if you want to look into the Langrisser series. Langrisser 2 itself ramps it up massively over its predecessor. It's just faster overall, which makes it just a little bit easier to play. It's got a nice little touch up on graphics. Otherwise, it just builds on what made the first game so successful, with the nameless units to assist your named characters to give it that larger war scale feel. There's story chatter in the middle of the fights, which help pad out the lore somewhat and make you feel like you're actually part of the narrative. And in terms of battling, again, it works exactly the same way, where you will either fight multiple units or you'll fight one unit at a time. It's definitely on par with the Shining Force series in my mind. Noriyuki Iwadare has come back on composing duties with Asao Mizuguchi joining them as well. So the sound is absolutely brilliant. It's got a lovely animated intro at the start, which is great to watch. And the game is overall really great fun to play, as you can probably see from the screenshots alongside me. So again, it's very worth trying to track down via whatever method you can to play. And as I said, it's probably up there with Shining Force 1 and 2 as one of the better SRPGs that you can play. So there we go, some strategy RPG goodness for your Mega Drive and Genesis consoles. Hopefully it inspires you to try out some of these games. A couple of the early ones I hadn't actually ever tried before until I decided I wanted to make this video. I hadn't played Langrissa 2 prior to this point either, so it was good to be able to play through those, see what they were like, see what I was missing out on, and hopefully it's inspired you to go out and try some of these games as well. So I will see you in the next vid. Hopefully my intention is to potentially look at Game Gear, Master System, or even Mega CD, because I do quite like Sega systems, and I just want to explore some of the genres on those that probably aren't very well known. So I will see you again.